Cybersecurity, as you may all be aware, really, actually, cybersecurity is on the minds of every business professional these days, really, and its awareness has made it all its way to the executive management and board of directors. So it's taken a high seat there, really, actually, and it's really important. Where we all know it's really important these days, really. The reason being, it's probably this, which is the data breaches. We see them every single day now on the media, on the news, everywhere. We read them everywhere. You probably may not be unfamiliar with this statement anymore, really, because it's just probably looks normal to us, really. But personally, So I think this statement is really sort of being put forward mainly by media and some of the salespeople who really love to sell technology and stuff, really. So I'm not here to sell you anything, really, actually, today. What I sort of believe in is probably this, really. I would like to sort of bring this sentiment more towards everyone, really, rather than, security, when you say, is definitely incredibly hard to do, really, but defense is definitely doable. I wanted to, when I was looking at this presentation, really, I wanted to create a positive sentiment, bring out a positive sort of a presentation rather than, giving a fair sentiment of, it's not about if and when, really, things, really. So I'm going to more talk about, actually, on the strategies of cybersecurity, how to improve your postures, what to look for, really, and that's the main talk about this today, really. So I was going through some of the reports, really, this couple of days ago, and saw one of these reports, really. It was a bit of a surprise where, if you look at this one, there's a very high percentage there, really. It's actually more than 90% breaches could have been avoided had, the best practices and the security controls were put in the right way, really. They should have been, really. So it's not uncommon that, that we hear that it's difficult to do, really. It is possible. This is why my belief, really, that, we can do, really. In fact, being as a defender, we have an upper hand in terms of against the attackers. Because if you think about the attacker mindset, what they have to do is they've got to learn a little bit about your organization, do some information gathering. They have got to do a bit of reconnaissance. I mean, we as defenders, if you know your network well, really, you are already 2 steps ahead of them. So this is where I believe, things are, possible, really. That's the cyber kill chain there. So what can we do to improve the situation? One of the things I've been, wanted to talk about, actually, was the best practice strategy most of us actually follow in here, really, which is the defense in depth. And if you think about defense in depth, really, it's one of the most prominent and sort of a strategies everybody looks at, really, layered security. So layered security is really good, but if you are not sort of following the right way, really, actually, which is the way it should have been, really, then you probably would have some architectural weaknesses, and this is where most of the problems stem from, really, actually. And when it comes to the defense in depth, if you have 2 of your layers, sort of 2 or 3 consecutive layers, using the same kind of defense mechanism, this is where the problems are. So if you have, like, say, suppose an IPS and then sort of an AV on or kind of using this same signatures, really, which they're based on the main signatures, then you probably have the same kind of faults there, really, So if you think about, ideally it should look like that, really. Ideally, you should have all different layers from different sort of things, really, rather than using any similar consecutive layers there. So that's one of the things, actually, I just wanted to highlight there, really, because I've seen many of the people actually do use defense. Most of us, we use, actually, defense in depth, really, everywhere. It's just, making sure we do it the right way, really, actually. I don't know, actually, how many of you, really, over here, really, do use threat intelligence, really? How many of you actually use around here? Few? Yeah, a couple of them, really. I mean, in terms of, I've been looking at, different strategies and looking at different things, really, doing my research stuff. Then during the time, really, actually, I was thinking about, let me sort of get back to the definition first, really. The threat intelligence, it basically refers to the ability of the enterprises to collect and analyze information from a variety of sources and on the latest vectors and then apply that information to their own organization to fend off attacks, really. So that's what actually threat intelligence, many of us probably, the most of the security analysts are good at it, really, because they look at a lot of sources of information from different venues, really. They look at the human intelligence, they look at the open source intelligence like the public boards, the blogs, and all the different media stuff, really, which comes around, really, and then try and use that in their terms, really, and then make sure we tailor them, against their sort of company sort of things, really, threats they look at, really, on their side. So it's a really critical part of the active defense. I'm going to come to a point of active defense in the next slide in a moment, really. So the active defense is basically a process of personnel taking an active and involved role in identifying and countering threats to networks and systems, really. So now you would think possibly, actually, then what is the passive defense, really? Anybody for passive defense? Any idea about passive defense, really? It's basically all, you use them all the time, actually. So you use firewalls, you use all the systems, all the security controls. They are actually your passive defense, really, because there's no one actively involved in doing things, really. You just leave them over the night and then they still work, really. So that's more on the passive defense, really. Now, the reason I'm getting into this is actually because there's a sort of a strategy I've been looking at or trying to research on, which somebody has already worked on it. So it's called the active cyber defense cycle. Now, that's what it looks like. And if you think about this, really, actually, these things, following a cycle or strategy like that would actually come into place when you got all your other architectural weaknesses resolved, when you got all the other continuous monitoring systems in place, and there is a lot of things happening, actually, other than just following a model, really. Now, the reason I wanted to introduce you this one of these sort of defense models, really, was to make you aware, what things we can do to improve our strategy in that respect. So if we start looking at the left side of things, which is the network security monitoring bit, we have security analysts doing their job, really, all the time, looking at different areas of the network, looking for problems, looking for threats, looking for, different kind of areas, really, where they think there might be a problem or they might have seen some malicious, sort of threat actors trying to get into there. So that's their main job, really. If once they are good with that, then if you know your network, you're going to be picking up a lot of things which you may not probably otherwise, really. So if you think about the monitoring side, once they look into that, once they find things, really, where they might think it is a threat, probably could be a threat to the organization, it might impact the business, then they invoke something like an incident response, which probably most of us actually have in place. And the incident response, people sort of try and contain, eradicate, give it back to the threat and environment manipulation sort of teams. And the threat environment manipulation, basically, they look for, sort of documenting what the problems were from those threats, try and fix them, see what they can change on the network side or the architecture side, and then feed that information back to the threat intelligence again, really. So threat intelligence teams actually look for, those are the main analysts actually who look for all the different sources of information, which is where actually I was talking about the threat intelligence initially. So it goes into a cycle in that respect. So if you follow things like that, then there would be, one of the things you could probably look at in your organization in the future, really, or some of that. While going through research like this, I came across another sort of a similar model, really, which is very similar to what the active defense cyber cycle is. And this one was done by one of the guys actually in Intel Security. It's been there for probably more than 6 or 7 years now. And this is quite a good model as well, I thought, really. Now, in this, really, basically the only difference actually is between the names. The concepts are fairly similar if you look at it, really. Prediction comes from the threat intelligence part of it, really. So there are analysts who look into things, really look at, sort of active kind of a role in there in sort of doing different intelligence sources, go through that, understand, what to predict, and they feed that back into the prevention, so the teams, and that basically it is more similar to what the threat and environment manipulation teams are, really. So it's the other way around, but it's kind of a similar model, though. And going back to the detection, that's where your sort of the network security monitorings come into play, really, again. So it's And then you go back to response, and response feeds it back to the threat intelligence tree again, really. So it's a similar model. If you think about that, really, I'll probably go back to one model there, really, and yeah, that's the other model, same model we're looking at, really. So it's actually a similar model there. It's just different wordings and stuff, really. So these are a couple of strategies I wanted to, sort of bring it forward to, people like yourselves, and see what you can implement in terms of in your organization and how it fits well, really.